All right, well, I'm really sorry I couldn't make it to class last night. I actually just spent an hour recording and my computer flunked. So now I'm re-recording this presentation, but I wanted to start out with showing you why I couldn't make it to class. Over here, I live on Highway 142 down in Kenosha, which is right off the freeway, and actually we're in Summers, but our address is Kenosha. Anyway, across the street's Kenosha, and this gorgeous building going up right now by Clayco is a new Amazon facility. And on the other side of my gorgeous tree here, but over a bit, so not right on the other side, is another Amazon warehouse. They will be connected by some sort of a tunnel, according to my FedEx guy friend who drives a FedEx truck over here every day delivering stuff. So there's no driveway here. This is looking out from my house. So from my neighbor's house, you can really see that they have dug up the road. They've been fitting in, and this was before they dug deeper last night. And there's this wire going across here. So I could not get anywhere. They had told me when I came back, I was up at View School observing yesterday morning a student teacher, and I told the guy in the red hat, and you always know who the supervisor is because he's sitting in a truck doing nothing with a red hat on. I said, you gotta let me out by 3:30. I have somewhere I have to be. I have to be to work. And he said, we'll give it our best shot. And so 3 o'clock comes along, and I said, I was told I could get out. And they said, nobody told us. So, all right, I couldn't make the portfolio defenses for my students, which were gorgeous. I'm glad that I had watched them the night before. But as you can see, this is my road. Now, as in the last hour when I was recording, they have poured cement out there. We'll see. I have to park way up by the freeway and then walk to the house, which is fine. I'm glad I grew up Army. So anyway, I apologize for not making it, but what we're going to do is I'm going to try to keep this video to about 35 to 40 minutes, which would be all the talking you could probably stand. And then there'll be 5 activities within this presentation that I want you to do. So that will count for the other time in the course. And then bring your answers to those 5 activities to class next week, and we will go over them and then incorporate them into what we'll be doing for week 3. So just to review, we talked about all of these things: the perceptual, sequential, experiential thinking, learning, associative, affective, and constructive things that go into reading. And so when we say a kid can't read, we have to really give an operational definition of what we mean by a kid can't read. Is it because they can't decode? Is it because they can't look at a word and comprehend it? Well, is it a perceptual issue? Is it a sequential issue with the lettering? Is it experiential, that they've never experienced this so they can't possibly imagine? Is it a thinking issue? Are they just not sure? Do they not have the background knowledge to be able to get through? Can they not inference? Can they not predict? Can they not generalize? Is it a learning issue? Are they having a difficult time taking the information that they've learned in the past and putting it with the information we need them to know? Is it an associative issue? Is there a problem with being able to associate what they're reading with what they need to know, or what they're reading and what they need to understand? Is there an affective issue? Are they just not interested? Are they not motivated? Or do they see themselves as people who cannot read? And then that's when we get to that constructive, this ability to comprehend. So if we think of this, I should actually have it upside down, because we have to go through this ladder of all of this before we can get to constructing a meaning. So there's more to reading than just being able to decode a word, to break that code and to understand what it means. So let's go into, I think that was all we had. So the theories of reading development, we didn't get to this last week. And there are several theories of reading development. The 3 that are talked about in your book, the first one is a sub-skill, where we think of reading as a set of skills that go together. So being able to know that it's A, apple, B, banana, C, camel, D, dinosaur, E, elephant. That sub-skill, and then you combine putting together the t. So the C, camel with the A, apple with the t, the T, I forget what it was. But anyway, that you put those together and then they spell cat. So all of those sub-skills putting together. It's a pretty simplistic way of looking at reading, but for the very little people, there are a lot of sub-skills we need to get together. The interactive reading is very similar to 3. So reading is a combination of the reader-based and text-based processing. So very similar to 3, the transactive theory, which means that there's actually information being exchanged between the reader and the book. And that seems rather ambiguous. It seems, how can the book exchange meaning or change meaning with the reader? And I think if you think about a book you read as a kiddo, and then you read again as an adult, you'll understand that there's a difference of information exchange. So depending on where we are, what we're doing when we read a book, the information we get from it and how we understand it might be different from if we were to read it in another environment under other circumstances. And that's what this is. That transaction is dynamic. So we go between this wanting to get information and wanting to enjoy the book. So for example, your textbook is efferent. The point of your book is to get information. But at some level, you're trying really hard to make it aesthetic because you want to be somewhere in the middle. You don't want it to be so overwhelmingly about information that you can't enjoy it. But you don't want it to be complete joy that you're not getting information out of it. And I don't think that you're at risk of that at this point with this book. But the point is that it's transactive. It's efferent and aesthetic. It can go both ways. Okay, so that was the last little bit we didn't get to. There was a video here on metacognition that didn't come up, so I will, if I feel like we need to come back to that, we will. So let's go on to what we were going to do this week. So my goals for today are very different than what's going to happen. My idea for yesterday was to have us all working as a big group. And as a teacher, when you know 2 or 3 weeks down the line, there's a specific procedure that you want done, you start working up to it. Well, you're adults, so I can one day do it one way and then the next week say, okay, this is how we're doing it. But my goal in reading typically is we're not just reading all the time. We read for some time, we discuss, and then we go to centers. The goal for this week was that we were all going to do these activities together, and then next week start doing those activities as centers, because I like the idea of breaking up the class into 20-minute segments, because that gives everybody a chance to breathe, move around, get the blood flowing, especially after a long day of working with young people who are just done with school. So we're going to be talking lots about vocabulary. We'll be talking about some zone of proximal development and being able to use different teaching strategies. So why do these chapters out of order? Well, my idea was chapters 7 and 12 were more about how to teach. And I thought, let's do the how to teach chapters first. Then we'll come back and put in the things we want to teach into those chapters. To me, it makes sense like that. For the person who's writing this book and probably their editors, they set out a specific sequence that made sense, and it really does make sense. I'm going to mix it up a little bit. So what I want to do first is we're going to watch a video. This book is great because when we talk about, in that chapter we read about vicarious experiences, some of us are in a classroom, some of us have not been in the classroom long, and some of us have not really been in a K-12 classroom yet, or we've been in the PK4, PK5 classrooms. So in this book, when they talk about vicarious experiences, they really did provide an entire video case library to use in this class, and I do appreciate that. This one we're going to use is called the Zone of Proximal Development, and what we're hoping with our students is that as teachers, we plan lessons that are somewhere between where the student can and the student can't. We don't want our lessons to be too easy because they're going to be boring, and we don't want them to be so difficult that the kids feel like they can't succeed. We want our lessons to be in between that zone of proximal development, meaning there's some of it they can do, but what they're doing is a challenge. So in language teaching, let me extend this out a little bit, we call this I plus 1. So I meaning where the student is at the moment, 1 being a challenge. So that would be that zone in here. Now when we're talking about reading, all of our students, these circles are going to be in different places. They're going to move, what the student can't do will move left and right depending on what their proficiency level is in reading. So we're going to watch a short video clip, it's about 6.5 minutes, of a teacher and how she's using zone and proximal development in her classroom to teach poetry.
All right, kids, I want you to look up here, and let me just read this to you, okay? Poems ask the reader to see things in a new way. What does it mean that poems ask the reader to see things in a new way? Let's think about it. In the poem Brooms, how did the poet ask us to see something in a different way? Jocelyn?
It's using personification.
It's using personification. What is that, honey?
It's like it's trying to make the tree seem like something real.
It's like it's trying to make the tree seem.
Zone of proximal development is a pretty simple concept and one that good teachers, I think, have used intuitively for many, many years. It's the distance between a child's skill level or knowledge level coming into a situation and how you want the child's knowledge base to be actualized. So the zone of proximal development is the distance between those two things.
They swish their branches in buckets of rain and swash and sweep it blue again. And swash and swept it blue again. At the end, what color is the sky? Blue. It's blue, okay? So that's an example of a poet, in this case, Dorothy Aldous, asking us to see something in a different way.
In the poetry lesson that we did today, the zone of proximal development manifested itself in a very forthright way. What we've been working on from day one is the idea that poets ask the reader to look at the world in a slightly different way. And this is difficult for children who are concrete operational thinkers, who think in the here and now and are unable, for the most part, to abstract their thoughts.
It's a poem called Until I Saw the Sea. How many people have been to the beach? Just about everybody's been to the beach. And who has been to the beach? Put down your hands. Who has been to the beach on a windy day? On kind of a windy day. And what happens on a windy day at the beach? Raise your hand if you have a good idea about what happens on a windy day.
What we need to do day by day is to think about, okay, what do the kids know about poets and imagery? What small segment can we offer them today? And then where do we start tomorrow based on where it is that we've gotten today? And then to build in a stepwise progression day by day until the kids are where they need to be.
What I want you to do now, you see your journals today. You still got half a space to write. So remember, you always start with the poem is about, right? And so you try and tell me what you think this poem is all about, what the poet, Lillian Moore, is trying to tell us. And then on the top part of your draw, I want you to talk about the first stanza, about the wrinkly water. And in the bottom part here, I want you to draw a picture about the sea breathing in and breathing out. Okay?
In the lesson that we presented this morning, the children were actually asked to look at 3 different stanzas and to look at the way the poet presented imagery in each. In the first stanza, for example, the waves were presented as wrinkles in the ocean. What was in the first stanza here? Why did she say, I didn't know that wind could wrinkle water so?
Because the first time she went to the beach, she saw that the wind was pushing waves, and it was like clothes that were wrinkled.
So it was like clothes that were wrinkled, but what was really wrinkled?
The water.
The water. And what did the wrinkles make?
Waves.
The waves. Oh, you've done, that's beautiful. So you're going to do your writing, and then what are you going to draw? In the second stanza, the sun was looked at as something that was actually splintering the ocean. And in the third stanza, the tide was talked about in terms of the ocean breathing in and breathing out. What did she learn in the third stanza that she didn't know before?
That the water looks like it's breathing.
And what would that look like?
That the water goes back and forth.
Back and forth. Like that? Okay. So what do you think you might write up there? This poem is about a lady who
has never seen the beach and finds out more than she knew.
Perfect. The first thing she learns is, in all three instances, the children would not have been able to look at the ocean independently and say, oh boy, those waves look like wrinkles, or that tide looks like the ocean breathing in or breathing out. And so we had upped the ante today in terms of what we have required of the kids. Before it was one example, today it was two examples of imagery and poetry. And that's really what the zone of proximal development is about. It's a programmatic way of upping the ante day by day.
Juan, will you read what yours is about, nice and loud?
The poem is about the water on the beach. It wrinkles. The water goes forward and backward like you are breathing out in it.
That's great. Did you hear what he said? It's all about the waves wrinkling.
The zone of proximal development is important for teachers to know about, not because it's a large term that would sound good coming out of a teacher's mouth, but because it's a good way to think about kids. Where are we starting with each individual child, and where do we want to take them? And that's a question that teachers need to ask themselves each and every day at a group level and at an individual level. And so it's an easy way to think about what it is we need to do in the classroom.
All right. Now, the point about this video is that anytime we're teaching reading, especially, and she was using poetry, which is often difficult to analyze for young people, we always have to keep track of their zone of proximal development, and each of our students will be in a different place at a different time. So one of the activities I want you to do then, and I'll read the questions and then you can pause this video to answer them if you'd like. What is your response to Dr. Frances Hurley's discussion of the zone of proximal development? Does it add to your understanding of your readings in any way and explain your thinking? So when you think about what you read in your book, all the vocabulary that you've defined, the questions you've answered, how does it fit together with the zone of proximal development? How do they come together? Frances talks about building students' analytic abilities in a step-by-step fashion, always with an eye toward what the next lesson should be based on student understanding. What does that mean? So in your own words, I want you to explain it. You can feel free to go back and watch the video again, or go ahead and pause this and answer the questions. But bring your answers to class next week and we'll talk about them. Now the next thing I wanted to do in class was a vocabulary jigsaw. And this is where we were just going to go one person at a time around the room, and each person would teach their vocabulary word, whatever was next on the list. So we're not going to worry about that. What I would like you to do, and this is the next activity I'd like you to bring back to class next week, is I want you to take all these vocabulary words and I want you to put them in 3 to 5 categories. How would you divide up these words? How would you put them together? If you had all of your words on flashcards and you had to shuffle them around into piles of words that went together, how would you do that? What would you title those categories? Okay. So I want you to go ahead and do that for next class and just bring the titles of those categories back. How would you put them in categories? Then I want you to think about, don't worry about jigsaws because we didn't do that, but how does categorizing, think about having your own students do this. How could that exercise of having your students, they could write everything on little note cards and then move them around, or they could just, for your students who need kinesthetic time, that would be great for them. For the students who are more those analytical thinkers, they may not need to do that. But how would it help your students to take all those words and put them into categories? And then we're going to talk about why give students shorter lists. I would never give a K-12 classroom of students 30 words, but because we're in a college class, we only have now 10 classes left. That's why I did that. But we're going to talk about some of the appropriate numbers of words to give students and why. Just bring your discussion questions back. All right, now what I want you to do, another exercise, is you're going to find a nonfiction book. I was going to bring a bunch to class. I have my backpack over here all ready to go. But you can do this at home, and you can get a hold of some nonfiction and fiction books. Doesn't matter if they qualify as high school, elementary, or little people. But I want you to pick, this says 5 to 6. Let's make this 4 to 5. I want you to pick 4 to 5 vocabulary words out of here. And the great thing about the nonfiction books is they have a glossary, so that helps a lot. So pick 4 to 5 words, and how would you help students understand, learn, and apply the vocabulary from this book? Ideas. There's no right, there's no wrong. The point of this is to see where you're starting and how you grow. That's it. We're going to add ideas to what you already know. The next thing I want you to do, we're going to do this in class, but you can do it before you come back and bring the answers with you. Grab a fiction book. Now, I grabbed a bunch off of my kids' bookshelves, and I just grabbed one, The Diary of the Wimpy Kid, out of my backpack to demonstrate for you. And you're going to choose an example of an idiom, a simile, a metaphor, personification, a euphemism, or an allusion. Okay? So you just have to open the book to anywhere. Let's see. And if I'm looking here, and the Diary of the Wimpy Kid books, if you have those, are full of these. Anyway, I found a bunch when I recorded this the first time. Okay, here we go. I could tell the sound of Roderick typing was driving Dad totally bananas. Now, driving Dad totally bananas, I would classify that under an idiom. And there may be students in my class, especially if they have another language background, who do not understand that you cannot drive somebody bananas. How can you drive them to become a banana? So I would want to explain that. I'm just looking to see if there's another one in here. Earlier I found a simile, but again, that's just because I opened up the book and these books are full of them. So I want you to try to find examples of at least one. If you can find a couple, that'd be great, but bring your information back to class. And they're going to talk about how can we help students remember these. How can I help a student remember that driving someone bananas means you're just driving them crazy or you're getting on their nerves, okay? So how would you do that? I'm not looking for a long page, just write it down right in your notes from class. So from this, I'm going to answer these questions about the zone of proximal development. The jigsaw we're not going to do, but I do want you to put your vocabulary in 3 to 5 categories, and then I want you to think about why is this important? Why is doing this kind of an activity important to help students comprehend? Bring all of your discussion questions, and then you're going to do your fiction, nonfiction, so fiction vocabulary, nonfiction, an example of idiom, simile, metaphor, personification, euphemism, or allusion. And then what would you do to help a student remember this? Okay, so that's 5 activities I want you to bring back. Not long activities at all. We'll not do this every week. So again, my goal was to have everybody, and we were going to go through all of these and discuss all this information. We'll catch up the first third of the class next time, and then we're going to move on to integrating all of this with chapters 3 and 4, vocabulary, and more study questions. And this is when I'll be bringing in the information from studying the foundations of reading test as well. So we'll have the first third of the class again will be large group, then we'll break into some centers for about an hour to an hour and 20 minutes, depending on if I want 3 or 4 centers, haven't decided yet. Probably 3. And then we'll come back and discuss as a large group again, which is how I would do a reading class anyway. So if you have any questions, oh, I didn't tell you about the Google Docs assignment. So for the assignment that I was going to talk about this week, I sent you an email just a little bit ago. And one of the things we're going to do this semester is the reading teaching strategies. Now, back in the dinosaur age, when I was in teacher learning school, we would have to create these huge binders like this, huge binders of resources for each class. And I graduated with binder after binder after binder. And I had to do it in my master's program too. So in fact, my husband and I just purged all those binders because it was just overwhelming and outdated. So what I want you to do is look at these and sign up for 8 of them. You are going to explain 8 of them. So I just showed you on here, I put my name on 2. Now, the great thing about Google Docs is as soon as you write your name, it's going to save it. Okay, I sent that link to you. Just choose 8. Now, I also sent you another link that shows you what I want you to do. And this is where you're going to type your summaries. And I titled that one Summaries. And so I chose visualization. And I put my explanation there, and I put books on tape, put my explanation there. I'm not looking for you to write pages and pages. The idea is to create a resource that you can use when you graduate for quick ideas, or when you're doing student teaching or practicum, for quick ideas on things you can do with the students when you're just going, I'm overwhelmed at the moment, I'm not sure what to do, or you just need some fresh ideas. So we're going to put all of ours in here, and this will be about 58 strategies total. And again, the idea is a half a page. If you need 3/4 of a page, great, but the goal is not to go too much longer than that because these are supposed to be quick strategies. Now, on this sheet down here, I put vocabulary games. I put it 4 times. If those are all filled up and you think of another vocabulary game that must be shared with everybody, send me an email or go ahead and add yourself down here as vocabulary game and then your name. And I'll just make sure that whatever's left over gets covered so that we have that as well. So I hope that makes sense. I sent you the email with the links to the strategy sign up and to the summary. So you'll sign up here and you do your summaries here, and you can start your summaries whenever you want. A lot of these are in your textbook, and most of them are online. You can find them in any teacher pedagogy book, any teacher methodology book. So you can do these at any time. If you don't have anything to do this weekend, you can sit down and do all 8 of yours this weekend if you wanted to, but sign up for 8. All right? Okay, if you have any questions, give me a call, a text, an email. I am around this weekend, and I would be more than happy to help you. Take care.